welcome to Washington Talk. I'm Young-Kyo Kim. U.S. President Joe Biden will host South Korean President Moon Jae-in at the White House on May 21st for their first summit talks. While North Korea will be at the top of the agenda, the summit is expected to serve as an occasion to reaffirm the U.S.-South Korea alliance as Washington ramps up efforts to form a united front against China. Today we'll go through these ahead of the upcoming summit. Joining me is Patricia Kim. Dr. Kim is Senior Policy Analyst with the China Program at the U.S. Institute of Peace. She was a Stanton Nuclear Security Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Elbridge Colby also joins me today. Mr. Colby is co-founder and principal of the Marathon Initiative. He previously served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy and Force Development. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, Dr. Kim, what is on the first priority for the Biden administration as it prepares for the summit between the U.S. and South Korea?
The overarching priority for both the Biden and Moon administrations will be to demonstrate the overall strength of the U.S.-ROK alliance and its ability to comprehensively address regional and global challenges. There will likely be an effort by both sides to demonstrate a coordinated stance on North Korea policy and advancing peace on the Korean Peninsula, as well as the ability to jointly address a range of issues, including upholding democratic values and a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific region, addressing regional threats, including those posed by China through economic, technological, and defense cooperation, and jointly addressing global challenges like the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change.
All right. What about you, Mr. Colby? For President Joe Biden, what is the most important issue to be discussed with President Moon Jae-in?
Well, thanks, Young-Kyo, for having me on the show. And I think as Patricia ably laid out, I think North Korea will be the top issue for discussion. But I think sort of lurking behind this is, of course, the issue of China, which the Biden administration has continued the Trump administration's focus and kind of, I would say, confrontational, certainly competitive stand vis-a-vis Beijing. And I think the reality is that as the 2+2 statement from the U.S.-South Korea meeting a couple months ago indicates, there does seem to be some distance between the Biden administration and the Moon administration on this issue. So I think it'll be interesting to see what comes out. I wouldn't be, hopefully they will be able to conclude some meaningful language coming out of the summit and policy alignment, but I'm a bit skeptical.
President Moon said he will use the upcoming summit with President Biden as an opportunity to push for restoration of diplomacy with North Korea. And the Biden administration earlier announced it has completed the North Korean policy review and it is open to diplomacy with North Korea. What are the ways to resume stalled talks between Washington and Pyongyang?
Well, I think the greatest difficulty with resuming diplomacy with North Korea is the fact that North Korea doesn't seem interested, at least at this point, in coming back to the negotiating table. According to media reports, the Biden administration has tried multiple times to quietly reach out to Pyongyang, but North Korea has yet to respond. And the Moon administration has also continually messaged to Pyongyang that the door for talks is wide open. But again, North Korea hasn't really shown interest in engaging with the outside world. Some experts speculate that the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic partly explain why North Korea has shut itself off from the outside world. And it's been suggested that perhaps offering humanitarian assistance or COVID-19 vaccines could be one way to engage North Korea and to ease the door open for diplomacy. But so far, it doesn't seem like North Korea is willing to accept such assistance at the moment.
Seoul keeps calling for easing sanctions on North Korea, while Washington maintains the sanctions needs to be in place to restrict North Korea's ability to continue funding and developing its nuclear weapons and missiles. Will sanctions be discussed between the two leaders when they meet?
Well, the Moon administration has long wanted to restart economic and tourism initiatives with North Korea as a way to build confidence and restart diplomacy. But many inter-Korean projects like the Kaesong Industrial Complex have been unable to resume due to existing sanctions. So while it's very likely that these issues will be discussed between the U.S. and South Korea, it's also very unlikely for Washington to greenlight the unilateral lifting of sanctions without seeing indications from North Korea that it's willing to take some kind of reciprocal steps. And this is the essence of the phased and calibrated approach that the Biden administration has decided to embrace. I think ultimately there are different views on the balance and timing of economic carrots and sticks between the US and South Korea, as well as other major players like China. And this is an issue that the US ROK alliance will need to continually work on to ensure that the two sides remain coordinated, because that will put them in the best position to jointly advance peace on the Korean Peninsula.
Dr. Kim, will they be able to narrow their views? From the Biden team's announcement of the North Korea policy review, did you get the hint that they are willing to gradually ease the sanctions?
Well, I think the key was that they don't want to do, they're not necessarily looking for a big deal or a one-time deal, and they're open to, again, a phased and calibrated approach. So what does this mean? I think this could mean a lot of mini deals along the way to the end point of denuclearization. So I think sanctions relief could be a part of that, but again, it would have to be matched by corresponding steps by the North Korean side.
All right. Mr. Colby, it is widely considered that no country has more influence on North Korea than China. And the Biden team, as well as the Moon administration, seem to acknowledge that fact. It is difficult to make a deal with North Korea without China's cooperation. Will the leaders of the US and South Korea be able to come up with a way to persuade China on the North Korean front?
I think no. I mean, I think the chances of Beijing actually doing something productive to move the needle on North Korea is essentially vanishingly small. In much better circumstances, almost 10 years ago, Beijing dragged its feet and was not helpful. Now, the fundamental reality in world politics, and certainly in Asia, is this competitive relationship between the United States and China. So China has no incentive, and I'm sure no interest in helping the situation on the peninsula. I'm sure they will advertise it, particularly to South Korea, to the Moon administration. The point I would also say is I think that North Korea, I mean, the dynamic here is that my understanding, and others know it far better than I, but Pyongyang does not just want to be a kind of a tool or sort of a client state of Beijing. So there is, I mean, that means that I'm not sure how great Beijing's influence is over Pyongyang, and also Pyongyang has an interest in not being completely pushed into the PRC grip, and so that does open the space over time. I'm not sure that this, my impression of the Biden administration approach, and we'll see. I mean, as Patricia put it, I mean, I think it's kind of an incremental back to the traditional approach, which I don't think has borne fruit. I mean, frankly, nothing has borne fruit with North Korea, but I doubt we're going to see much progress come out of this approach towards North Korea.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Kim, what is your view on this?
Well, I think China right now is comfortable with the way things are. I think during the early days of the Trump administration, it was genuinely concerned that the United States might actually take military action on North Korea. And so that really spurred it to cooperate and really sort of kick up sanctions, to sign on to more, and to try to move the needle on diplomacy. And now, things have calmed down. And so China's in a relatively comfortable place. But having said that, I think denuclearizing North Korea and bringing peace to the Korean Peninsula is one clear area of common interest that is shared by all of the key players in the region, including China. China has no interest in seeing a North Korea with nuclear weapons, because as Elbridge said, China and North Korea don't always have the best relationship either. And so, I think Seoul and Washington need to continue to push China to cooperate on the North Korean nuclear challenge by making the case that this is one area that is ripe for cooperation, in an era that will be, that we're seeing less and less areas where the great powers can cooperate. And it's in everyone's interests, including China, to bring peace to the Korean Peninsula.
Mm-hmm. North Korea's human rights violation appears to be a thorny issue between the US and South Korea. And furthermore, the US State Department clearly expressed its concerns on South Korea's new law banning the leaflets with messages critical of the North Korean regime. Dr. Kim, how do you think the US and South Korea will try to deal with North Korea's human rights issue?
Well, there are indeed differences between the Biden and Moon administration's respective approaches to human rights issues. I think the Biden administration has made very clear that democratic values need to be front and center in our approach to foreign policy, and it hasn't shied away from calling out the Kim regime for its human rights violations. Whereas the Moon administration has refrained from such explicit criticism based on the calculation that not offending the Kim regime is the most effective means to speeding up the larger peace process, which would ultimately improve human rights for North Koreans on a faster timeline. So at the end of the day, I don't think the debate between Washington and Seoul is on whether or not North Korean human rights matter. I think everyone agrees that they do, but it's on how best to address it. So human rights will be an issue that will require careful coordination by the two sides to avoid conveying conflicting messages to North Korea.
Mr. Colby, in general, do you see that the Biden team is putting much more emphasis on human rights issue compared to the previous administration, not only on North Korea, but also on China?
I do. I mean, I think Dr. Kim is correct that the Biden administration has really fronted democracy as it construes it and human rights as central. I mean, I think the president's speech at the Munich Security Conference, Secretary Blinken's comments, the president's comments throughout indicate a real, very, very heavy ideological focus. Personally, I think that's a mistake. It's certainly a change from the last administration, certainly in its degree of emphasis. But I do think, I mean, that there will be areas where it will cause significant tensions. I mean, the particular issue of dealing with North Korea is one, but it's already, I think you see it in South Asia and Southeast Asia where it's going to cause tensions. And, it's also going to, the way the administration has talked about some of the issues within China is going to intensify the competition even more than it already is. Not to say these aren't real issues, but I think there is I would almost say a crusading aspect to the Biden administration's approach to this that is, very salient in their approach, and I think other countries are going to have to take that for what it is, as it seems to reflect the views of the president himself very clearly.
Mm-hmm. And South Korea's top diplomat Chung Eui-yong has recently urged Washington to appoint a U.S. special representative for North Korea, a position which was held previously by Stephen Biegun. And earlier, there was a report by the Washington Post that Biden administration does not have a plan to do so. Dr. Kim, is this something that should be done more promptly?
So I don't believe that the Biden administration has yet to publicly address whether or not it will appoint a special representative for North Korea or on the timing of the appointment. But my sense is that it would be very useful to be able to convey to the North Koreans, to South Korea, and the rest of the region that there is indeed a dedicated person in the Biden administration who is empowered by the president, who is working to make progress on diplomacy and to deal with the challenges that are posed by North Korea. So whether this is a special rep or someone who is already inside government, I don't think that matters as much as just showing that somebody is dealing with this on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. What is also expected to be on the agenda of the summit is bolstering the bilateral military alliance between the U.S. and South Korea. What is the pressing issue in the U.S.-ROK military alliance, Mr. Colby?
Well, I think the primary focus of attention has been the SMA issue, the burden sharing issue, which has now been resolved. The issue of exercises obviously will presumably come up. My sense is that in this summit, they probably won't get at the deeper issues, which are going to dominate the alliance military discussions going forward. The primary, which is the U.S. focus on China as the pacing challenge for our military. And I think the Biden administration, to its credit, has been very clear that China will be the pacing priority challenge.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Colby, during the previous Trump administration, the joint military exercises between the U.S. and South Korea had been greatly reduced as former President Donald Trump, he wanted to pursue building relationship with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Do you think same approach can be taken in the Biden administration?
Well, I don't think the Biden administration will go for that kind of approach for a variety of reasons, and I'm skeptical that protestations or offers of goodwill are going to change the calculus of the Kim government in North Korea, in Pyongyang. But fundamentally, I think the broader issue that it's important for a South Korean audience to understand is I think that the North Korea issue is not going to be able to have the dominating kind of focus for U.S. policy writ large, but even in the peninsula that it once had. As I've mentioned and emphasized, China is going to have to be the primary focus. And the North Korea issue, I disagree with Dr. Kim. The North Korea issue is already subsumed to that broader competition. I don't think the United States and China share meaningful interests. I have no doubt that in Zhongnanhai, they see North Korea as part of this broader competition. I mean, I don't know, but that I would bet money on it. And so we are not going to be able, they may want to tactically tilt to, lure away the Moon government or to get us distracted. I mean, China benefits enormously from a distraction that the United States has with the North Korea issue. Of course, in South Korea, North Korea is not a distraction. It's a primary immediate threat. So I don't want to understate that, but I think there is this kind of tension in our relationship between Washington and Seoul that we can't paper over. Ultimately, we do have very aligned interests. I think South Korea has a strong interest in the alliance. Otherwise, it is exposed to China's coercion or worse over time. And the U.S. has an interest in the ROC alliance, not only for history and shared values, as people emphasize, but also Seoul's major economy and military force, its proximity to Japan. So we have an alignment of interests, but we need to look at it more clearly where things are going, and that's going to be about China primarily for the United States and also North Korea, but in a secondary way.
The Biden administration keeps stressing the importance of the trilateral relationship among the U.S. and South Korea and Japan. In fact, President Biden had his first in-person summit with Japanese Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide and is having the second one with South Korean President. Does this show the Biden administration's continuous emphasis on the trilateral cooperation? Why is it so important for the U.S.?
Well, I think for the Biden administration, it's very important. I mean, because I think they see this coalition of democracies that the president and Secretary Blinken have talked about a lot as very critical. And of course, South Korea is a bit of an outlier on this issue that, being a democracy, it has not aligned as much. And I think they see that kind of, the Biden administration sees that symbolic alignment as very critical. So I would expect quite a lot of pressure on Seoul and Tokyo to align more. I mean, my own personal view is that the United States certainly benefits from good feelings between Tokyo and Seoul and cooperation. I'm not sure it's as central as some people say. I think the main thing that Seoul really should be focused on in South Korea is its self-defense and working with the United States on standing strong vis-a-vis China. But I think the Biden administration will push it, and I think from our perspective in the United States, it's certainly to our interest to have good relations between Japan and South Korea.
Mm-hmm. My last question for both of you: what would make the Biden-Moon summit successful? What would be your criteria to assess that? Dr. Kim first.
I think as long as the two sides are able to demonstrate again that the US-ROK alliance, despite certain differences that we talked about during this program, is overall very strong, and that it is ready to comprehensively address regional and global challenges, whether this is the immediate threat of North Korea or longer-term threats in the region, such as those posed by China, and it's able to sort of do some forward thinking on these issues. I would mark that up as success.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Colby, same question to you.
Yeah, I think it's a first meeting in-person meeting between the two leaders, and so I think expectations should be tempered to be fair. But I do think that from the U.S. perspective, probably a significant and pointed mention of China would be a real indicator of progress. If you look at the statement that the president and Prime Minister Suga made, not only did it mention China pretty clearly, but also even mentioned the Taiwan Strait, which is very significant. So there's been quite a lot of progress, say with Japan. Obviously, there's been movement with Taiwan. There's been good moves with Australia and others. So South Korea is a little bit of an outlier, but recognizing that, I'm not holding my breath for dramatic language, but I think some language in that direction would be a fair standard of success.
Well, it was reported that the Biden administration reached out to North Korea once again after it has completed the North Korean policy review without hearing back from the North Korean regime. And apparently, North Korea is waiting for what will come out of the first Biden-Moon summit. Dr. Kim and Mr. Colby, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And that does it for this week's Washington Talk from Voice of America. Please join us again next week for more analysis.